What's up, guys? My name is Tim Roswick, and today I want to talk about world building, what it is, why it's important, and some tips for you to kind of build your own world. So straight up, world building is exactly like what it sounds like it is. It's the building of a world. It's the whole process. How it's different from like story writing or, designing a story or whatever it is that world building kind of takes the whole world as a context rather than just your specific story. So for example, a lot of people like to start with just the characters, right? Like they start, okay, here's my main character. He loves this person and that happens, and then he's going this way and all that. And they write all those details out, and that's great, but understanding the motivations of the character in context of where they're at is really important too. The intrinsic motivations are totally important, but the extrinsic kind of situational things that he or she goes through, are really important. And world building can kind of help you by starting with the world, right? Like if you're making a sci-fi game, what kind of universe is this? What kind of military is there? What kind of political system is there? How many planets does it cover? Do these planets get along? Like, how do they trade back and forth? Is there an internet back and forth between them? Do they have to send courier ships? Like, how does all this work, right? And that's what world building is. It's kind of building the whole world and the concept. If you look at something like Lord of the Rings, it has fantastic world building. Part of what makes Lord of the Rings, the movies and the books, so fantastic is that Tolkien spent so much time building out the beautiful pieces of this world, and all of them are really exciting. And a lot of people overlook the power of world building when they're starting a story, whether it's a game or novel or whatever, because they just think they need to start with the characters because the characters are most important. And that's true, the characters are very important, but the world in which those characters live in is also very important. So one of the things that I'd like to do whenever I start a story heavy project, and I say project because I've written short stories, I've written game stories, I've built games, never finished any story heavy game. I'm working on one now, but I've written a lot of stuff like that. I've designed and I've helped other people with it as well. And it kind of comes down to designing the bigger picture. And it really helps because once you have all these locations, these motivations, these factions, this group likes this group doesn't like that group, and you understand all that, the story is usually a lot easier to write. It's a lot easier to build. Once you have this world and you understand these places, it can kind of help you in your mind kind of walk through and build this stuff just kind of as you go. And once the world's out there, it can definitely be very useful for your writing. But in addition to that, one of the things that I've done that I think is really cool, and I don't think a lot of people know this, but I've designed a couple different worlds, and those worlds have a series of different rules, a series of different things, how they work. And actually a few of my games take place in the same world. I've actually written short stories too, that all take place in the same world. They're just completely disconnected stories. And that's one of the things I really like to do, because there's a one world in particular, it's a sci-fi world that I built a while ago when I just like designing stuff. And that world has a lot of my creativity in it. And I spent a lot of time building out the specifics of how these gates work, and these gates orbit their stars, and we connect to the gates, but the gates have to align at certain times, and so you can't travel between star systems all the time. You have to wait for the gates to align to where you want to go, and how it all works, and how the trade system works, and what corporations there are, and how all that system works. I spent a ton of time on that. So doing all of that ahead of time has really kind of helped me write several stories. It's even the same world where my game Black Rim is in, which is probably the next game I'm going to pursue, the next bigger project I'm going to pursue after Phylophobia. And it's helped me significantly write the stories, but it also kind of helps me understand the difference between places. And this is something that's important with games too, and especially in written works. Because a lot of people don't realize that the visual identity of a place is super important. And this will probably be a different video all on its own. But if you think about the Lord of the Rings, right? Because that's a perfect example. If you think about the Shire, If you've ever seen the movies or anything like that, you've probably seen the movies. The movies are fantastic. The Shire is like this really calm, homey type of hobbit hangout, right? Like there's all this grass, there's these hills, everybody's running and playing, and it's all happy and fun times. And then you go to like the elf world, right? Or I think it's Rivendell. I think that's what it's called. Lord of the Rings fans are going to kill me if I get anything wrong. I know. I said elf world, but it's elf city. It's big, massive mountains, and there's these cliffs and these waterfalls, and the very distinct architecture. And it's like these Roman stone columns atop these mountainsides with just these long cliffs, very, very gray. Whereas the Shire is kind of green, lots of green. The elf place is very, very gray and white. That's like their color. And then you go to somewhere like Mordor, which is like where they're trying to get the ring to. It's black and red. It's really, really dark and really distinct. And there's fire everywhere, and there's lava, and shit's going down, and it's crazy. But that's a really important point for world building, because those are 3 distinct locations. And it doesn't matter if you're writing a book, the way that you describe those locations is going to be drastically different. Or you're making a video game, the player playing through those locations is going to be drastically different, right? That's really important, is a differentiation between areas. And that's one of the things that building a world ahead of time can kind of help you do. You understand the context of how all this fits together, where all of it is in relation to each other, how it all works, what the player's journey is like through this system, and you can kind of design all that while at the same time designing a bigger sense of presence. One of the things that I think has made the Lord of the Rings movies and books so fantastic, like they are so significantly better than like anything else of its kind. It's fantastic. Every time I read the books, every time I watch the movies, it's one of the very few 12-hour marathons that I can sit down and do for movies, because, I mean, giving Peter Jackson plenty of credit, but outside of that, the world building is so fantastic. Like everything fits together. You understand the motivations of all the different groups. You understand why all these people come together. You understand the dire situation that makes all of these, some of them warring races, come together to go on this journey to make this attempt to dump this ring and destroy this ring, because it's going to destroy everybody. And it's so interesting watching all this stuff interact. And I don't think you could write a story like that without doing world building first. So I think world building is super important, and I hope I've convinced you of that. If you have any questions on it, or you want to know how it works a little bit more, leave me a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. But it's definitely something that's important, and I think you should take it into account, especially if you have a story-heavy game, even if it's not necessarily like sci-fi or fantasy or whatever, even if it's not a traditional type of genre. Just understanding the rules of the world and who exists in it can really help. And as a final point, I will just say that writing sequels or building other games in that world is so much easier once you've built the world. And that's something that I've definitely experienced. So that's all I got for you today. I hope you found it useful. If you did, leave me a like and a thumbs up. Let me know down below. Once again, my name is Tim Roswick, and I will see you again tomorrow.